Today I'm with Amy, and I want to jump right in and ask her a really juicy question before we circle back around and let everybody know what she does.
Okay, that's
Um,
making me nervous.
don't let it make you nervous. We were
Juicy
talking
question.
about how it
Okay.
might not record, was one of the questions that I had when I first did interviews. But she shouldn't be nervous because it is recording, and that's why you all are going to see it. So the first question I wanted to ask you are that artists have like an eye for beauty and stuff,
Yes.
but they don't often apply it to their businesses,
Mm,
and that kind of like I don't know. There's something right there where it's like I guess they think that the art should speak for itself, and I was
yes.
wondering like what about the branding and aesthetics of your business gives an
Uh-huh.
artist a leg up?
How does it give an artist a leg up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is quite something that I notice a lot, and it sort of breaks my heart because you see that with very many like really talented artists, usually visual artists who are, photographers, painters, people or graphic artists who are very visual, and they're obviously talented, but there is a lack of like there's a disconnect between their branding and how they present themselves on their website, on a postcard, and their work. It's like a huge disconnect. And I don't know exactly why there is. It may be because there is a certain, like you said, they think that the work should stand by itself. And also, there may be some sort of like concern about being too corporate and being too polished and stuff like that. So there may be several things going on. But so I'd like to encourage artists to think about this as a missed opportunity because it's a huge one of the artist's biggest asset is the way they view the world. So that's the way you view the world. It makes you different from another artist. So you see the world a certain way and you capture it a certain way. So it's a very special way of this. It's what I call a lens. So you view this world through this lens, and it's special. And every artist has their own way. Whether you are watercolorist, or you are an oil painter, or you take photos. So it's all tinted by this lens. And so I really encourage artists to think about branding and presentation as an extension of this lens, as an opportunity for them to use this lens to present their work, in a certain way that draws people in. So, for example, um, I'll use myself as an example.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate like whimsical art, sometimes ethereal. So like there's this dreamy quality in which I try to communicate in my artwork. And so part of my branding, even though I'm primarily a brand designer, is to create that experience of like you've entered this ethereal world, this unusual world, and when you go on my website, I want them to feel this way. I want them to feel transported. I want them to feel that it's a doorway to my imagination. And so with visual artists, I really encourage them to think about branding as an opportunity for them to do that, to create this world, to create a world through their lens
Mm-hmm.
and on their website with the materials. So because it's a missed opportunity, and
Yeah.
it's a fun way for them um, to tie it all together.
Yeah, to connect with people.
Yeah, to draw
Yeah.
them. Basically, the idea is to to draw the viewer into the world, and a website is basically it's your studio. It's basically your studio. When someone steps into your studio or your gallery slash studio, they are going to be immediately sort of enthralled by what they're seeing. They're entering the world of this artist, and so you want to create that effect with your website.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're, and it's depends on person to person. You may not always want it to be whimsical. You may want it to be stark and gallery like, and it's up to you. So you want to evoke a certain emotion that's related to how they see your work, and so that's how you want them to feel when they come on when they go on your website. That's how you want them to feel when they're holding a postcard or a mini portfolio or anything of yours that you leave behind for somebody to look at.
Mm-hmm.
And so I encourage them to think about what that feeling is and what that lens is.
That's great. I love the lens analogy. That makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense. And especially because, I mean, some people here probably listening are photographers. I know I
Yes.
have a good amount of photographers in my audience. I think there's some in yours too.
Hmm.
So that's definitely like an immediate reference you can get that, yeah, I like
Right.
that.
Right.
So let's circle back around to who you are and what you do.
Uh-huh.
This is Amy Tan, and she is the founder of the Tree Space Studio,
Mhm.
which is kind of a branding and creative branding and presence, I would guess that would be a good way to put it. Amy, why don't you tell us more about what you do in your own words, where it makes more sense than mine?
I am I'm an artist and a brand designer,
Right.
primarily for creative and product-based businesses with a mission or with a purpose. I was trained as an architect, so I come from a sort of a more three-dimensional like design point of view, experiential point of view. But I built my design studio from an artisan's point of view. So I spent a number of years doing hand-painted event invitations, larger paintings that get shrunk down into small invitations. So my studio as an artisan started that way. But in recent times, I have really enjoyed helping other artists and other product-based designers, product-based businesses brand themselves, tell the story, and sort of like what is unique about them, and make sure that they're presenting themselves that is consistent with, their creativity,
Mm-hmm.
and consistent with their work. Because I find it a lot of I do find it people that come to me tend to be creative, but they're creative and they're visual and they're really talented. But sometimes they need somebody else to sort of see the bigger picture, how it all ties together,
Yeah.
and sort of like able to guide them and tell them, hey, that's this is what you're good at. And you really should emphasize that,
Mm-hmm.
and and sort of like become the glue. If that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do get that. So, in that vein, do you think that it's useful for artists to use their own medium in their branding? Like, if like a watercolor artist were to like paint their logo and like their navigation buttons and stuff?
I think that's entirely up to the artist because I know that some artists, like for myself, I want my branding to relate to my work. So I
Mm-hmm.
use a lot of watercolor and I use a lot of texture because that's a big part of what I do. But another artist may like the starkness um, of
Mm-hmm.
a brand, like a really simple, plain branding,
Really
so that their
professional.
work, yeah, they may want it to be really sort of clean looking so that their work just pops.
Yeah.
And so it really depends on the artist. And like when you talk about specific elements of brand design, like a logo, I like to encourage artists to think about where the logo is going to end up. So from a very beginning, when you're designing a logo for your studio, you want to think about, is the logo going to go on my painting? Is the logo going to go on um, my photos that I give out to clients, or a watermark somewhere when I'm posting it online. So think about where you'll be using your logo the most, because one of the mistakes I made in the earlier iterations of my logo when I was first branding for myself as an art studio was that I didn't consider where my logo would be in relation to when I'm creating a signature or a watermark for my art. And so it was kind of awkward where I couldn't place it in the middle and I couldn't place it in the corner. And so you want to think about that from the very like early on when you're trying to brand yourself. So you don't find yourself spending all this time or paying a lot of money
Yeah.
for a logo that's not going to fit in,
Yeah.
where where you want it to go on your artwork.
Think like a designer.
Yes, think
Kind
like a
of
designer.
engineer how it's going to work. That makes sense. So,
Yeah.
what makes a memorable logo?
Well, a logo should be like have fun with it. Like like if you want your logo to be your signature, you may want it to be like if you're somebody who's bold and flamboyant, you want your signature to be like really sort of bold and just like like very expressive. And
Mm-hmm.
so play around with that, and that may be your style. Or maybe if you prefer something really discreet but iconic, so you may want like a little emblem
Mm-hmm.
and so I think the logo itself should be um, I like to think of it as a tiny little visual pod of story. So if you imagine, like, if you can condense your entire lens or your worldview into this little tiny emblem, that's what your logo should be.
That's so cool. A visual pod of storytelling.
Yeah, it's a really compact version of saying how you view the world.
Yeah. I mean, so do you think that all logos need to have like a little graphic piece that like targets bullseye? You know, like stands alone, and they can just like put the bullseye on something, and everybody knows that it's from Target. Like, do you think that most or all logos should have that?
I think it's very, very useful, and I don't think that you have to design it as like together. There's several ways you can do it. So you have the Wordmark logo, which has, says the name of the company. And then you have this graphic emblem, which I call it an emblem. And it could be designed together as one cohesive thing.
Yeah.
Or it could be designed separately where you would use it in different situations, because some people like the idea of just having a word mark to represent themselves. If that's the way their aesthetic is, they just want something simple. But I encourage them to think about whether it's just shortening it into like initials or playing out with a way to be initials. Like, think about how useful having an emblem is. Like you say, you're able to just put it there discreetly somewhere. It could be turned into a sticker. It could be turned into a rubber stamp that you can use to stamp a corner of your painting or your photo or watermark without like screaming, "This is who I am."
Yeah.
So, but at the same time, it's telling people that you have left your mark behind.
Yeah, that's really useful. I don't have one, and I had somebody tell me one time. It was pretty funny. She told me straight out, "You don't have a logo unless you have an emblem," and I was kind of like, I was a little iffy on that. But I think that that you're right, that it's very useful. To be able to use it on different areas. For one, like I was thinking about jewelry designers, and like they'll mark things. Not all jewelry designers do this, but you can mark things with like a little tag.
Yes.
And I think that that's, especially when you're making high-end jewelry, really important for people to be able to kind of follow your work, and it can become collectible. And you can't fit a whole person's name on this little tiny tag.
Right.
So having like a brandable, instead of just initials in a Times New Roman font, if you have a brandable thing, it fits in with the rest of your experience, the rest of your branding.
Absolutely. It's definitely more useful with certain artists than others. Definitely with the jewelry artists, because they have to fit it in a small space. And it's useful for fashion designers or who are creating. They might want to have hang tags or sort of symbols that that can be turned into like a buckle or something, like how you would imagine how Chanel does it, or any of the famous fashion houses. So it's definitely more useful for certain creatives than others. But in general, I like to encourage people to think about having one. And when I design for my clients, I like to include that as part of the package.
Yeah.
And they can use it whenever they want, and you can use it as an avatar. On on your social media.
Yeah, that's a great concept. Yeah, you just triggered the thought of ceramicists who already do this. It's like tradition for them to create. For those of you who don't know, they create like a little stamp that they stamp into the clay before it gets fired, and it's usually a symbol, not like them writing their name out and signing it.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so they already do it. We're learning from different mediums. So I wanted to know, like, you do a lot with like the visual elements of branding, but I think it's also crucial to kind of match your textual components to the visual ones. Do you have any thoughts or tips or anything on bringing the words that you're saying to line up with the visual presentation?
Yes, absolutely. So part of what I do in the pre-work with the branding workshop that I do with all my design clients is there's a chapter that I have in there about brand character. And brand character is basically the social persona of your brand. And it doesn't have to be, usually it's yourself, because personal branding has become more and more popular, because people usually want to connect to the person behind the brand. but it can also be a promise or a lifestyle promise, like with fashion houses. So the brand character is the social part of it, this an almost human entity, and so this character has obviously has a personality, and depending on your brand, on your visual, your creations, or your work, it could be playful, it could be serious, it could be like the girl next door. It could be sort of somebody who is like flamboyant and bold. So it could have many different types of personality.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of brand design, when you're doing things like you think of relate to brand design, like logos and websites and stuff, visual stuff, you want to be able to express that character. And so it's the same with writing. So a person who is more shy and introverted would write differently than somebody who is playful and or sort of coy and so the personality is different in writing as well, and you'd want it to come across that way. So if you're somebody who is, what I see happen a lot, especially in the B School, Marie Forleo's B School group, is they admire Marie because she is entertaining and she has a very like outgoing and casual formal writing, and so they try to emulate her.
Yeah.
And then sometimes coming off as not quite genuine because they're not being themselves. So I really encourage all artists and creatives to think about this character that you want your brand to be associated with, and make sure that his or her voice is consistent in the visual part of it and also the text part of it. And write like how you are. And if you're casual, write casual. If you're formal, write formal. I'm a little bit more formal. I write like you're reading a novel, sort of. And I know people say that you should always write like you're talking to somebody. I don't believe that.
Yeah, not always.
I don't believe that, because it's not always true to your character. It's not always true to how you present yourself. And true, you don't want to be so convoluted that you confuse people, but that can also work. I've seen people who are really convoluted. Their mind is in all sorts of places, but people love them. They love them because they're so true to themselves. They bring something different to the online world. And one person who does this really well is Harvey Brooks. And if you read any of her stuff, she is just like, her writing is one of its kind. She has a very distinct voice. And so I encourage everyone to think about what their voice is like and how to reflect their character. And it's not always the way everybody says you should be. Like, go be casual, write like you talk,
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's good advice when you are like a naturally casual person and trying to pull that out into writing. Some people are uncomfortable with it, and I think it is good to like record yourself and transcribe it or something like that if you're casual. But if you're, if you present yourself in a more professional, kind of more formal, as you said, kind of way, then it's not going to work. It's just going to feel awkward and disconnected, like you said.
Right.
So, yeah, I absolutely think that you need to apply the tricks with a grain of salt, only if they really work for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that's really tricky that I'm always challenging myself to bring a lot more of my voice in is when you're writing sales copy. Like, for example, if you're writing sales copy for your one of your creative packages, or maybe a consulting package, like if you're a creative mentor, you want to be clear. You want to be able to, like, people should understand what you are trying to sell. So there's a compromise there that you'll have to make in being sounding too poetic or too unusual, and like letting people know exactly what you're trying to sell them.
Yeah, and it's an interesting balance. Some people know I worked as a copywriter briefly in a little period before doing what I'm doing now, and I ran into a lot of people who had that problem where, as I was working with artists still then, and as artists, they like to get really poetic, or they like to not even touch it and be like incredibly short and simple. And it was like there's a sweet medium where you're really captivating and interesting, but you're clear and everybody knows what you're talking about, because when you're trying to sell something, people have to know what they're buying, or they're not going to buy it, no matter how clever or creative or interesting
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, definitely some caution there.
Yeah.
But if you're blogging, treat writing as part of initiating them into your world, as part of that lens.
Yeah.
So make sure that and I think more so for creatives than anybody else is because they're really wooing people with how they look at the world. So writing is a big part of it. I've seen some really great writing by visual artists, and you just feel absolutely swept away.
Yeah, that would be probably the goal.
Yes.
It's interesting that we're talking about this. I've been talking a lot on my blog recently about creating an experience for your customers instead of just a transaction. Yes. And I think that branding through your text and through your visuals is actually a huge chunk of that.
Yes, absolutely.
When you're trying to, as you said, like pull people in through your lens. This is what does it. This is what gives the foundational elements. I had talked about like packaging and how you tie things together, in literally wrapping things so that they look good to your buyer. But before your buyer even gets to that point, that customer needs to be swept into what you're discussing. They need to really feel you and your brand, or they're not going to buy. You talk about, on your blog, I noticed you talk about the Heart Revolution.
Yes.
Which is like all of this right here.
Yes.
Can you tell us more about what that is, what the Heart Revolution is?
So here's what's going on. There, on the online, being able to go online and set up businesses so easily and having all these tools at your fingertips is turning the web into a really crowded marketplace. And we already know this just by going on Facebook and seeing like the endless streams of people competing for attention. Yeah. So, and I've actually asked a lot of people this as well, because it's like, how do you make sure, like, what do you even look for? Like, what do you look for when you see all this endless stream of information? Like, if you're looking for something, how do you know that something is, how do you know when you see that something? And everybody says it's that connection. It's intuitive and it's heartfelt. It's like they look for that connection. They look for somebody that has a story that resonates with them. They look for somebody that somebody has mentioned, like, oh, I've worked with this person. They're great. I love them. They look for that extra layer of meaning to everything. And because that extra layer of meaning basically dissolves all this other noise and it like stands out. So the Heart Revolution is basically, we're moving towards that. We're moving towards a time where people are increasingly consulting themselves, their heart, to make decisions about what they want. And so in order for us to survive in this world, you have to make sure that you're authentic. Because otherwise, if you're not authentic, if you're not genuine, then no one, like, how will people find you? How would the right people find you? They won't recognize you. They won't know that they when they see you if you're not being yourself.
They won't connect with you, yeah.
Yeah, they won't connect with you. And so knowing your story really well, knowing what's meaningful to you and communicating that is very important. And also making sure that when you work with somebody, you are giving them an experience that they treasure. So it's all about being heart-centered. It's all about like genuinely caring for this person you're working with, so that way they take away an experience that they want to tell other people about.
Yeah.
And so that connection is really important.
And I think it's kind of, at least for artists, it's kind of, and even for everybody really, it's kind of your duty to really express who you are and make it really clear, because it's your job to make it easy for people to decide that they want to buy your art or they want to work with you, or whatever situation you're in. They're not going to be able to come to you and magically see through whatever facade you're putting on. So then you're doing them a disservice, because they're not going to get to purchase your art because you haven't put yourself out there in the right way. And, your art might be something that really touches their soul, and you're giving them the chance to miss out on it. You're not providing them with the way to get there. And so I think it's really, really important in the sense of like, it's dutiful that you are really clear and and really consistent in your branding,
Yes.
and really open about it and about your
Yeah.
personality.
Absolutely. It's a way, it's an opportunity for you to really tell people what inspires you.
Mm-hmm.
Show them what it's not only tell, but show them what inspires you. Like
Yeah.
really communicate from the heart and like make like that is your strength. That is what you do best as an artist, is because everything is from inside, from your soul. And so share that. You don't always have to share that. You don't always have to be an open book if that's not your style.
Right.
But share that. Share a bit of that. Bring people into your world.
Mm-hmm.
Draw them in. And branding is a great way to draw them in by, every time you send somebody a piece of art, don't just send them the art. Like include a little, like a card that tells them, oh, how why was I inspired to do this? Anything that
Mm-hmm.
can that allows you an opportunity to connect with somebody. Like I like to think of packaging as your one opportunity to connect with someone that is so far away from you. That
Yes.
person could be in a different country, in a different part of the world, and they're buying something from you because they want a glimpse of your world. And so
Mm-hmm.
they're probably never going to meet you. And so why not talk to them?
Mm-hmm.
Include
Absolutely.
something that is personal and human, and tell them, I appreciate you getting this from me, and I just want to tell you where I'm coming from, like how I came up with this idea. You can do something that's pre-done. Like it doesn't always have to be
Right.
absolutely personal every time. You can include a line or two
Yeah.
and make people know that you're human and you care.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes artists, I guess, they're so involved, and I've been guilty of doing this too. They're so involved in like creating this art that they forget that they can do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've had a couple purchases from artists and handmakers where they, on the receipt, they just wrote out like a line or two, like, I'm
Hmm.
really excited that you bought this piece because this one means a lot to me,
Oh,
or
that's great. I love
yeah,
that.
so just a little like quick note. It only took them a couple seconds while they were taping the packing label on. It didn't take a long
Yeah,
time. And they
yeah.
just hand wrote it, and it means a lot. It's that personal connection that somebody took the
Hmm.
time to handwrite this, that a factory didn't produce your piece,
Exactly.
that
And that's why, yeah, no, you're totally right. And
yeah.
that's why people go to Etsy. That's why people buy
Mm-hmm.
from artisans, because they want that personal connection.
Mm-hmm.
Because they know, like you said, they know that that item didn't come from a factory. And that's why major retail brands like West Elm, Anthropologie, I mean, they have production houses set up to manufacture their own goods, but they still buy from artists. There's always
Yeah.
a small section for artisans because they know their buyers want that connection.
Yes.
They
Yes.
want that intimacy with an artist. And so take advantage of it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you have to. That's just your strength.
Yes. And like we can spin this conversation off in a million directions.
I know.
Oh, we could talk forever. Um, but I think we're getting near the time where it would be a long interview that people would want to watch.
Okay. I
So,
did do.
are there
Yeah.
other things that you wanted to discuss? We have time to discuss one or two more things.
Yes, I do have one really, really important thing I want artists to think about.
Yeah.
And that's from years ago going to trade shows and seeing collections of items. Is you and if you were a matured artist, like you've been in it for a while and you have done this, a long time, you probably know this. But if you're just starting out, it's really, really, really important that your work is cohesive.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important because it goes back to that whole lens thing. It's like and it's fine. People go through phases. Like if you study the work of, the artists in history, there's always like their work evolve over time,
Mm-hmm.
over their lifetime. But there's always a marked, like, there's always like sort of stamp of this is the work of this artist, and you should be able to see that in your body of work at
Mm-hmm.
any given time. And if you can't, ask somebody about it. Somebody give you, ask another fellow artist, designer to give you some feedback. You should have that. Your work should be presented as a cohesive whole. Especially important on your website because you know things in a collection look better for one, and the other thing is it really sort of like um, pounds in this idea that you look at a world a certain way. So it really emphasizes it, and if you see a lot of the popular shops on Etsy, and the ones that are doing really well, if you look at their gallery of offerings, they almost always have a very similar feel to it.
Right.
And I don't think that this should sort of limit your creativity. It should be something but at the same time, you should be conscious of it because it presents better that way. And from a branding standpoint, it makes you much more appealing. And if you ever want to be in a trade show like a jewelry artist or a stationery designer or illustrator creating stuff on stationery, if your work is not cohesive and it's all over the place, nobody would look at you. You won't even get noticed.
Yes, my first art fair I ever did, I went ahead and grabbed my sculptures, my prints, my jewelry, pretty much everything I had ever made, and just filled the tables. I think I made like 2 or 3 sales the whole day. I mean, it was just everything, and there was no level of quality that it had to be at. It wasn't like, I was just anything I had ever made that, I was just like, here it is. And there was no style that was in thread throughout it, so it wasn't cohesive in any way. And it just doesn't work. You're totally right. People they didn't connect with it because it's just all over the place. They can't see who you are. They don't connect with you, so they just don't buy anything.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's kind of heartbreaking because a lot of artists do that. Like even if you go on Etsy, and they're always like, why isn't people buying? Like, well, I don't know what you're good at. Like, why am I buying? Like, I want to buy work from you because I treasure this point of view you have, this lens you have. And when your lens is so all over the place, then there's it dilutes the meaning behind your work. And so if there's one takeaway from this interview, I want them to sit down and really think about what exactly is my lens. Like, what is this story that I have to say? What is the story I'm trying to tell? Or what is this way that I view the world that makes me special?
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that you can't crumble at the thought of it if you know that you're not consistent. It's a chance for you to gently improve things. It's a chance for you to look at your work and go, this 1 or 2 pieces, they just don't fit. It doesn't have to be, I'm going to scrap all my work and start over. You can just curate like a gallery owner does.
Absolutely.
You can just kind of gently curate out some of the things that don't quite fit and slowly produce more and more work that does fit into your style. And especially that's important for people starting out when you don't necessarily know your style. You can kind of shimmy on into it slowly. It doesn't have to be today or tomorrow that it gets done. But it is important to be aware of it and to be constantly thinking about how you're going to present yourself and how your work is going to fit in with your branding.
Exactly. And one last thing I want to say that you just reminded me of when you mentioned, even if they're not ready and they're exploring different ways of expressing themselves, is to, every time you think about a different idea, think of creating a collection. So even if you're exploring different mediums, like you're playing around with fabrics, you're playing around with paints, so think of it as, I am going to create a collection. And so even if it's not a one-off piece. So even if this season or this 3 months, I'm going to create a collection of paintings that are all going to be similar. And so it gives you an opportunity to create a body of work. And that body of work will undoubtedly present better than a single work of different kinds put together.
Yeah, that's a great concept. And I know a photographer who does a set of, her name's eluding me right now. She's a photographer who does workshops, and one of her workshops is that you take the same photo every day for a month. And it's not always the same angle or the same lighting, but you're taking a photograph of the same subject. And so people will do a window or a chair or something like that. And that theme creates automatically 30 pieces of cohesive work.
So
maybe you don't have to go that far. It doesn't have to be 30 days of the same painting or anything like that. But the concept of sticking with some sort of theme or a common thread in your work, and it's gonna automatically help you keep things consistent.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. And it's also, and like having just one limiting item would, so you start thinking about differently. How many ways can I look at a window? How many ways can I photograph or paint a window? And so your mind just goes explode at the amount of creativity you can inject into this one single item, which I love. I love limiting, like just deliberately limiting yourself. So
yeah, that focus can often make it more creative. I actually liked when I was in art classes in college. A lot of my friends would be frustrated by the prompts that you'd be given. You're given all these rules for your project, and especially when you're in the more intro-level classes, they give you a lot of exact direction, and people would be very frustrated with it, and I always found it actually really freeing and really helpful. Instead of my entire brain of ideas, it was like, okay, you have to go in here, and that helped me kind of pick what to do next.
Oh, I feel the same way. I love it. I thrive on when somebody just tells me, do this.
Yes. Yep, I agree. I agree completely. Well, where can we find you online, Amy?
I am at the TreeSpace www.treespacestudio.com.
I'll pop that on the screen when I edit.
Yeah, treespacestudio.com, and you'll see I have 3 sections to what I do. It's like I have a brand school. Sort of like I call it a finishing school, because most people have they already have some idea of where they're coming from, a little bit of brand design, but then they want to polish it up. They want to take it to the next level. Make sure that they're appearing professional, like pulled together. And so my brand school is for that. And then I have my design studio where I work with people who want to level up their brand. Nice. And you can also talk to me, like jump on a phone call with me and just do some imagination work. I do 15-minute consultations.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I looked around your site to make sure I knew what was going on with what you offer, and they're like, it's all really like designy. You'll see when you get on our site there. And you scroll to the bottom, and there are like these beautiful 3 boxes that are like, do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do this? It's really clear, and I think that you can actually learn a lot, even if you're an artist making products, from someone offering services when it pulls on you. There are lessons to be learned, like the fact that she's very clear and very concise. She says, do this, do that, or do that. There's not like too many things going on. So that's something to pay attention to when you're in there, is how you approach telling your customers what to do next.
Thank you.
Click there. Click there and learn. Well, thank you, so Amy. I think it's time to close out before we get so long people don't want to watch.
Oh, it's been so much fun. I really enjoyed it.
It has been, and I think that this is going to be really helpful. We talked about a lot of really great things. And I'm going to try to make time to put show notes down, because we talked about a lot of different things that people might want to look into, resources and stuff. So I'm going to try to put that together too.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll talk again soon.
Okay.
Yeah.